This video is sponsored by EBSCO Industries, Bank of Moundville, Moundville Telephone Company, and Tuscaloosa Tourism and Sports.
Hello. Well, this is a little bit different without a lot of children running and seeing everything that's usually here at Moundville in the festival. And when we did start the festival, we wanted to highlight fourth grade because at that time that was the grade that you were getting the Alabama history introduced to them. And so being able to tie in Moundville with the curriculum and then the other groups that were here in historic time. And so I represent a creek hunting camp from the year about 1780. And so I have things that the Mississippian Indians would not have had. But some of the ways have been passed down. Some of the type of foods and things didn't change that much, except we got introduced to some European foods. So this time of year, the men would go out hunting, and they would hunt all winter, and they're hunting for the deer hides. And the hides are important because it gave us something to barter or trade with. So most of you know that word bartering because it is in the history book. So this becomes a value was put on this. And so tradesmen that were from all over, a lot of them were Scotsmen, and they came and they really treated the Indians fairly good. And so they were wanting to the leather to take back to Europe. And then this was used for clothing for men. It was very stylish for men to have leather breeches, and then they went to fringe jackets, and then they went to these huge hats with big feathers in them. And because the lords and kings have all of the elk and the deer on their lands, they couldn't get a hold of this. But here in North America, especially in the Southeast, we had the deer. So a monetary value was put on it. Sometimes they wanted it with the hide, with the hair on. Sometimes they wanted it completely tanned so that it would be ready to be worn. And this is something that the women did. And if it goes through all of the treatments that you have to do to get deer, if this gets wet, so I have on moccasins and leggings, and mine have been brain tanned. And if I get these wet, they will dry, and they won't harden up. In the summertime, they're breathable. And so that's our modern stop right there. So this is a piece that a good friend, and I'm gonna back up so I can get a hold to the water. I'm sorry, I don't want you to hit it. So this is a bigger piece. This has been tanned, and a good friend of ours, Mr. Jimmy Sanders, who's gone on now, did these for me to be my leggings, and I can't cut them up because I know the time and the effort that he put in it when he presented me with these. We've been to some events where it's gotten very cold very quick, and so I put ties in it so I can wear it as a shawl around my shoulder, especially if it starts to rain. When we say it's been brain tanned, it's been put up on a rack. It's been scraped. All the meat that was there has been scraped off. And then once you start working it, and you're breaking down the sinew within the hide itself. You're not through when you get through with that. Once that is done, then you do it needs to go through brain tanning. And the brain of the animal is used. You would mash it up, add hot water, let this soak in it, sometimes overnight, a couple of days. And then you would get it out and you would start to pull it. And as you pulled it, what you're doing, you're breaking down that sinew. The brain has a lot of lanolin in it, and it helps break that up. And so this is very time consuming, but as you do it, you can actually see the hide starting to dry. At this point, it's still not wearable because if you got it wet, it's all going to go back to like a chicken skin. It's going to be just horrible. The last step is that it's smoked. And so a fire pit in the ground, you get a fire going, so you have red, red coals. And then when it burns down a little bit, you put a tripod around it. You lace these together around it. You have to really know what you're doing. And then you put evergreen, which is usually always cedar. And the cedar goes in, the smoke from the cedar, the resin from the cedar is the final part that gives this wearability, breathability, and the fact that it doesn't get right. This is a piece of rawhide. And so I'm going to show you what happens. Right now it's dry, and you can hear it. This could be used on a drum. And sometimes when we have drummers, where at events they'll come by my fire before and to dry it out, to get the dampness out of it so they can play. But if you put this back in water and let it soak, it's going to get soft, and it will get so soft it will feel like raw chicken skin. And so if you don't do those steps, that's what you end up getting. And so you have to go through all those steps to get to the brain tan. No, southeastern Indians did not chew the hides. That was not done here in the southeast. So now it's getting softer and thinner. The texture of it's completely different than the texture back here. And when this dries again, it's going to get hard again. What would I do with this? Well, sometimes I need some lacing, maybe some lacing in someone's moccasins. Maybe I need to tie something up. And so this gives me the ability to have some rawhide that I can do something like that with. So it takes a long time to do that. So the men hunt, they bring the hides back, they help the women get it up on the racks. And then they go off hunting again. And so a lot was going on, and usually this is at a camp that's mobile. So this can be taken down very easily and moved. Most students will ask, do you really sleep here? Yes. At night, we have seen the most fabulous amount of animals here. And like Mr. Grayhawk said the other day, the mist that rises here in the park. And if you're ever lucky enough or blessed enough to be able to see it, we know the Mississippians kind of had a belief that the earth was floating on water. And when the mist rises on these mounds, and I've seen it rise up almost to the top, it looks like all of the tops of these mounds are just floating. And so you can see where that belief came from, because they were seeing it here at nature. Doesn't happen all the time. You can't say, oh, I'm going to get up early tomorrow, because you don't know. Maybe a little bit, maybe not. And then sometimes you're just in the right place at the right time and you get a blessing from it. So Moundville is very special because of a lot of things that are here on that. Because it's a hunting camp, we have things that they hunt. So besides the deer, sometimes there were other animals that would come. So does anybody know what this one is? This is a red fox. Beautiful, beautiful. And we have a red fox that lives here. As many years as I've been part of Moundville, we have always seen red fox. Gray fox, well, it's got red on it. How can you call it a gray fox? Well, gray foxes do have red on them. And all red fox have different colorations. And so these are the foxes that we see here, and sometimes the traders want these, and we could trade for it. This one's kind of special, a little bit different. Any of you can identify him? It's a bobcat. And there's his little tail. And there are his claws. And they will scratch. And the one hanging on the end is my possum. He's been with me as long as I have been doing living history. He just hangs around and follows me wherever I go. Now, sometimes, instead of staying open, we need a bag. And so this one, when its hide was tanned, it is done now so that it's inside. You tan it inside out, and that's called case tanning. And so it was tanned that way, but it was not cut open all the way. Look at the bottom of the bobcat. Look how beautiful this animal is. And he lives here in our state. And but somebody wanted to make a quiver out of this, and so it was case tanned. The my favorite one though is a story that I can tell. You know, we keep our corn in a corn crib, even in modern times. My grandson went down to the crib, and he was learning how to use his blowgun, and he took it with him because that was part of his job every day. And so when he got down there, he had to check underneath, he had to check the roof, he had to check the wall. He opens the door to the corn crib, and there sits Mr. Raccoon, very fat Mr. Raccoon, eating corn. And that's our supply for food. There's other things in there. So he shot him with his blowgun, brought him to me, and we case tanned him inside out. And so he's kind of like, he's kind of got a hole in him all the way down. He can carry things in him. And a lot of children, when they see him, we talk about the fact that he has a mask, which you can see. There's his mask. Those are his ears. They're real. That's his nose. And yes, it has a little whisker coming out of it. There's also a hole down there. But I use it to carry spoons in, my wooden spoons. So Mr. Raccoon is not going to eat any more of my corn. And I now have a nice bag to carry my spoons in when we go from different places. So some things necessarily were not traded, were used for us. So there's things in here, copper and brass pots, and we know that copper was used for decoration here in Moundville, but it had to come from somewhere else, and I think that has been talked about this week. My fire is a smoky fire. I don't want flames. And this year we had some squash. Squash and pumpkin are very close kin. Winter squash. And so I cut one in circles, and I'm letting it dry. And I want the hot smoke to do it. And it's beginning to, but it's not going to, it's going to have to take longer. It's still kind of spongy. I'll keep turning it. And when it gets done, it's going to look like this. Now this doesn't look too appetizing, does it? These are some I made last year. In fact, they're about the last from last year. And believe it or not, those are from year before last. So what do you do with them? Well, in the winter, when food is scarce and it's cold outside, we would break these up and put them in our pot of corn, which is always going, and anything else, maybe some dried deer meat, but we would reconstitute this. So what this has been done, it's basically been dried like a you put food in it and you dry it, freeze dried foods, and so people do that today, and the air that circulates will actually dry them out, and then you can store them. But the smoke will do the same thing. We do meat, deer meat, making it jerky. I have some somewhere, and it's just smoke. A lot of people don't realize that the smoke has these ashes and things. They have salt in them. It tastes like salt, and so that helps with the preservation of the meat. And so sometimes we're lucky and we're just doing big pieces of it, trying to do it in a hurry, so we can get it done. And you have to always watch because people come by in the camps and start eating on it. Some of the plants here did come from the garden here at Moundville that we're helping to maintain. This lovely yellow that everybody thinks they're allergic to is goldenrod. Goldenrod, you can make a tea out of it. Is very good for like arthritis, maybe for burns. So the tea can be made out of the leaves. This also can be. This is not what causes allergies because this pollen is so heavy, you see it won't come off. So this is bee pollinated. Another plant that's growing at the same time as ragweed. Its seeds are so tiny and light that wind carries it. And if you get around it, it's going to be all over you. And it's all over this park. You don't see it, but this is the one that gets the blame for it. That does not cause allergies. It doesn't cause hay fever. It just gives your to be able to see them on the roadside. It's going, wow, look at those. And there's all different kinds and sizes that are here in Alabama. These are some sunflowers from our garden. These are kind of neat. That one I've already done. The sunflowers are fairly big. And everybody goes, well, where's the seeds? Well, this is the center of the sunflower, the dark part. And there's the seeds right there around them. So these seeds just come out. It's kind of fun to do. And then you've got the seeds. You can take these and husk them, get the husk off. And then you can parch them. And when you parch them, you have parched sunflowers that you get like from the grocery store or wherever you go when you get these big bags full. And that's what some of the baseball players put in their mouth. And so they'll put them in their mouth and hull them. That's what I was doing and getting that outer part off. And then they would spit that part out and eat the sunflower. So before we go, is that what you're telling me?
Yeah.
This is a plant that grows all over our park. It's called Amaranth. This one is goosefoot. And you can kind of tell that. There's a center of it. So like if you have a goosefoot, the center part is longer. And they have these smaller on the side. And so this one is, I just picked it this morning, so it's not getting quite dry enough. Here's some that when you pick them, the next year they'll get a little bit bigger and then a little bit bigger. So if they will let me have time to do it. We're going to put this on the fire. We're going to let this start to get hot. And what it's going to do, while I get something to pull it with. I moved everything. This gives us a vitamin that we need. It's called lysine. Amaranth has lysine in it. This never was planted. It grows around the edges of a garden or disturbance. So the seed itself, once it's dried, can be stored. You can parch it, grind it, and put it in with cornmeal. Or the other thing that is good for it is that as it parches, and if I got the fire hard enough, we can do it. Don't burn my spoon. It will actually start popping just like popcorn. It has lysine in it. We need lysine. It's drought tolerant. Man does not have to plant it, or woman. It will come up on the edges of the garden, like I said. Every year that you pull it, it'll get a little bit bigger. Comes back up the next year. You don't have to even plant it. Because it's drought tolerant, they're trying to introduce it to countries that, like in Africa, that have they don't have a lot of water, hoping it will replace corn. Corn takes man time to do the rows, plant it, water it if there's no water, get weeds around it when they come, if the squash and beans hadn't covered the weeds up. And so man and has to be involved with corn from the beginning to the end. Amaranth, you don't. You just wait till fall, and it's beginning to pop on the edges. Can you see that? Right there. Right there. That little white. And here it goes. Here it goes. Can you see it? We can actually hear it. Well, I'm shaking it because I want to move it around so I don't burn it. And then when it all really starts going good, and we get it all done, before it's done, you have to remove it from the fire, because if you don't, it's going to keep popping, and it'll burn it at that point. So it's just, but it's good. It's really, really good. It's good for you. It's good to get the flour from it, put it in a bread, especially if you don't want to use wheats and things like that. So it's a good natural plant. It's in the Hispanic diet. I've had some of the best cookies that are amaranth cookies. And so they can be crushed. It can be added to breads, and so you have a crunch to it. Ground completely up into flour. And so sometimes when people say, "Why don't you have a big fire?" Well, we don't need a big fire. We just need a hot one that's smoky, and the rest is going to get done. The canvas that's here, and this would have been a trade item. So a lean-to used to be you would take the bark off a tree, cedar especially, and then let it dry out flat, and then you could use it on the lean-to that way. And they would go back to the same hunting places, and so that wood would still be there the next year. When we start trading with the English, they have canvas, and so that's when the canvas starts.
We have a question from, I think Everett is the person asking the question. Does amaranth grow wild, or is it farmed?
No, well, here in Alabama, it grows wild, but it is farmed because the seed is used so much now in baking and in cooking, and so the use of it was one of those ancient seeds that has come along, and so yes, they're now doing it. You plant it and basically forget about it, and then it can be harvested. And like I said, this amaranth that's around here, it's tiny seeds, but every time that we harvest it next year, it should come back a little bit bigger. So yes and no, but here in Alabama, a version of amaranth is one called pigweed. The farmers hate because it gets in the cotton, and they can't. It has to be pulled out, and it will come up wherever it wants to come up. But the greens are good. It's one of the early greens in the summer. I mean, in the springtime. So that's one of the greens, along with pokeberries that come up. But the greens on poke are very good until the stems start turning red. And so, if you've been eating nothing but cornmeal and dried meat all winter, this these early greens are things that would have been gathered and eaten. So amaranth is very good for that too.
Is there anything else you want to show us about the camp?
We can lower this front canvas, and we had made, my daughter and I had made side pieces that could tie up on the sides, and we could sleep very well. My good friend Butch Fuller called me up. Are you in your shower curtain? Because I had a curtain that went across. But I was in that at Fort Toulouse one year, and I'm sure that Greyhawk was in that one. And when a tornado came, it had been warm. They just drove by and said, "There's a tornado right on the other side of the river," and left. And we go, "Well, where can we go?" There was no place that we could go. And so you just did a lot of praying and hoped it would pass. And the next day, the temperature started dropping. It dropped down into the 20s. There was no wool blankets. The traders had sold out. UPS trucks were coming in the middle of the night delivering wool blankets, and people were lined up trying to get them. And so this works very good. It's a canvas tent, and people used to use canvas tent when they went camping, that before the lightweight ones come along. If you maintain it, you don't put it up wet, your canvas will last a long time. And in fact, this piece here is probably 30 years old, and still doesn't leak. And so it does really well.
Well, we have another question. Gray
Greyhawk has a
wants.
question too.
Oh, we have a question from Gray who wants to know what the antlers are used for. Do you have antlers there at your camp?
Oh yeah, we've got a lot of antlers. They're used for a lot of different things. Around my neck, I have a little knife, and this is made out of antler. And believe it or not, this is made out of a broken piece of cast iron pot. This is my knife I use, like a kitchen knife that moms use, and a paring knife to cut something up. Sometimes I need a knife that's a little bit bigger, like for the squash. And so that is another use for them. Using them as an awl to punch holes with. Flint knappers will get if there's a big buck, and they will put copper on it so they can use it to hammer when they do flint knapping. Put these up within our homes. This is not our homes. This is where they live during the wintertime as they're hunting. But in the houses that we lived in, you put antlers up and you've got automatic hooks to hang things on. So they were used for a lot of different uses, even for needles to sew with.
It sounded like Greyhawk had a question, so we'll go to Greyhawk's question, then maybe we'll wrap it up here at the camp.
All right. The question I had is, this camp, do you use it all year round, or would you have a permanent house along with this camp?
Well, this is a hunting camp away from the village. In the early years, the husband and wife and family would hunt on her hunting land, because it's passed down on her side, on the woman's side. And they would hunt just enough for what they needed during the winter, enough food, enough for clothing, and then they would go back to their homes. And their homes were built different styles. Early, sort of a log cabin. Still, some were using wattle and daub, but they were homes. They were permanent homes. This is not permanent. So so hunting season is over, then they would leave the poles usually in the woods, because you could easily get poles, and then take care of the canvas on that. So it's not a permanent home.
All right. Well, thank you, Miss Rosa, very much. Very informative, and it's good seeing you again. And unfortunately, we don't have everybody out here like we usually have, and but we still are having a good time.
To support Moundville Archaeological Park, please consider visiting festival.museums.ua.edu and clicking Support Moundville at the top of the page.